Buddy, so Doug Schweitzer here. I'm a recently retired politician. I've recently joined Deloitte as a senior advisor in their tech media telco practice. And you know what? I couldn't be more excited about what we're going to be talking about here today. When I was minister, I did the economic recovery plan for Alberta, focusing on how we could strategically diversify Alberta's economy. And when I looked at the future of Web3, diversification, what's happening in a whole bunch of disruptive industries, nothing could really articulate that more than what the people on this stage here are actually executing and doing in their day-to-day lives and in their businesses and what they're doing. So I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. It's been a really kind of up and down year. People are questioning what the future of Bitcoin looks like. What does the future of cryptocurrency look like? And we have the right panel here today to answer those questions. What we're going to do, we get fun fact time to make sure that we know a little bit about behind the scenes here. So we're going to go one by one down the line to let people introduce themselves briefly, but also give you a quick fun fact.
Sounds good. Hey, everyone. Pascal Saint-Jean, president of 3IQ. A quick intro on the company. We're one of the world's largest digital asset management. We were the first launch of fully regulated Bitcoin fund globally. And my fun fact outside of crypto is that I'm currently learning to fly a plane so I could bypass Pearson and the mess in these airports to be able to fly around Calgary and other of these fun events without having to worry about security and all that stuff. So.
I'm Alex Aichi. I'm the business development manager for Memory Express and also Bitcoin Marketplace. Fun facts. I used to surf. I don't anymore. I ended up breaking a shoulder. The next year when I went back and witnessing a shark attack about 6 feet from me. And that was the end of my surfing career. So here I am talking about Bitcoin and stuff instead.
Bitcoin just never turns off, so I don't know what these on switches are. I'm Adam O'Brien, founder and CEO of Bitcoin Well. Fun fact about me, in mid-2020, I was lucky enough to have dinner with Pierre Poilievre, and him and I talked about Bitcoin for like 4 or 5 hours, and you can pretty much time it to like 2 or 3 weeks later where he started going on his Bitcoin journey and flipping the Bitcoin standard in Parliament. So that's my fun fact.
Hi, I'm Matex, Bull Bitcoin Canada. We're a Bitcoin-only non-custodial platform. Fun fact, Adam Back taught me how to use a Rubik's Cube, and I've battled Adam here with it before. That's pretty much summary. So there you go.
All right. Well, we're going to start this off. Crypto winter. I mean, this is a concept that we hear about a lot in the media right now. It's been an interesting last 6 to 12 months in particular for the crypto market. What does 2023 hold for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general? And what are your kind of forecasts for the next 6 to 12 months, or what you think that where the world is going to get to in the next 6 to 12 months? And we'll kind of go down the panel here, kind of starting here.
Yeah, sure. Before we talk about the future, I think the question that was kind of being asked is what are we seeing on the impact of the price and its impact on the future? And I want to take a little bit of a step back. Let's look at the last 18 months and just really reflect on everything that's happened and the resiliency that's happened in Bitcoin. So basically, when we look at the past 18 months, we've had basically the hash the Chinese hash rate collapse. After that, we've had Terra Luna collapse. After that, we've had Three Arrows and Celsius collapse. We had interest rate hikes. And before all this happened, right, people were already starting to time the cycles. I remember a lot of traders were talking, let's try to time the crypto bull market, then we'll time the down cycle. People were already starting to think about the cycle like if it was a normal thing. And now that all these things had happened and the cycle is actually less severe than everyone thought, and Bitcoin survived all these things and just keeps chugging along, does its job perfectly, I think the future is quite bright. So without doing any price predictions, I just feel that I think the test of Bitcoin's resiliency has been one of the toughest in the past 18 months, and it survived all of it without a flaw. I'm much more concerned about a telecom infrastructure, and Roger's answering what the hell happened a couple months ago, but that's just me.
Right on. I'll talk a little bit more about what the future is, in my opinion, with it. Some of these things are not such a bad thing. If the market turns into a ball, it's been pretty steady for the last little while. The resilience is there, like you mentioned. Bitcoin hasn't really taken too much of an impact since its initial drop. What we're going to find in the next little while, I believe, is a lot of if you're involved in the community and you you go out and you join these groups like this and in meetups and discussions on these, you'll find that a lot of people that are interested in this stuff are very dedicated to it. There's hodlers out there. There's people that they really understand it. We're not at a point in the market where you have tons of people investing like in the stock market and you have people that don't really understand what they're doing. Most of the people that are involved right now in crypto do have a very good understanding of it, do know where it could go, what its potential is. And I think they're going to hold really true to that. The weeding out phase, this is almost a good thing. It's like the .com industry in the 90s when you saw any company that went .com boom, they were all automatically the market got artificially inflated, pumped up, but when it crashed, we weeded out a lot of the ones that just weren't really useful. They didn't have a good utility. They weren't made to survive in the net. And you're going to see the same thing with this. There's something like 17,000 different cryptos out there. Everyone's trying something different. Some people are copying other people, but in the end, you're going to see that the strong ones hold through with Bitcoin, and new innovation is going to come from it as well. So, especially with the way our markets and everything are going right now and the state of the world and everything, I do believe that Bitcoin and other cryptos, specifically Bitcoin, though, will be something that most investors move towards. It's going to be a safe haven for your money, a digital asset, a digital property, something where you feel that you can hold on to what you've worked for. So I see the future is bright, even if it is a bear market for the next little while.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that. I think that as the next 12 to 18 months sets the stage for Bitcoin decoupling from risk assets. I think that right now, the reason the knock against Bitcoin right now is it's supposed to be this inflation hedge, and it's not doing a very good job of being that, but it's still kind of tied and coupled in with risk assets because it's highly liquid, because it does so well at being Bitcoin. It's liquid, it's transferable, and it's easy to use. And I think that the next 18 months, as organizations take this opportunity where there's time to breathe, Pascal and I were talking about this being a great thing for companies because you can breathe. When it's all systems go, there's no breathing. It is pure catch up. And right now we have this time in our organization. We call this the biddle season, like the hodl season, but build with the flip. And we have an opportunity right now to set the stage for what we believe the next 12, 18 months are going to be. And it's quite exciting, I think, as we set the stage for Bitcoin to decouple from risk assets and turn into that safe haven for your money, turn into that hard money. Especially the timing couldn't be better or more timely, as society more than ever is paying attention to what garbage monetary policy can do to a fiat currency. And I think that the timing of everything is it's almost planned and poetic in some way.
Yeah, Bitcoin operates in cycles. Since we all got involved in it, we've seen it go up, go down. Every time there's a massive increase in the Bitcoin price, there's a flood of new actors into the market selling various snake oils and charlatan products. And that leads to things like Celsius and all these Ponzi sort of collapsing. And in the first major pump for Bitcoin, it was ICOs and any of the other casino coins. And then now what we've seen in the most recent large pump in Bitcoin is kind of the snake oil come in the forms of Web3, DeFi, and especially NFTs. All of these things are not going to survive. They're all going to die out. They'll rinse as many people as they can while they're around, and then they'll go away. What's for certain is that every 10 minutes settlement is happening on the Bitcoin network, whether you like it or not, and there's nobody on earth that can do anything about that. So regardless of the ups and downs that we'll continue to see and all the new buzzwords and techno babble that will come into the space, Bitcoin will survive. It's not going anywhere.
Since we're talking about the future, we do a quick rapid fire. I know we got our series of questions here, but quick rapid fire. If I'm setting an over under for 12 months from now, and I put that over under at 30,000, would you take that over or under?
Over.
A year from now? Under.
I got over still.
I'm not a fortune teller.
Part of our game. We're trying to
I
forecast.
could just buy some more when it's under.
Perfect. All right.
Price is irrelevant.
So, quick question I have here, and this is kind of interesting from a context standpoint. I mean, we live in Canada, a relatively thing, a stable market. comparison to many countries around the world. So we're seeing adoption more and more as a stabilizing force in countries that don't have the institutional stability of Canada or have higher levels of corruption. So what's the opportunity there to build out infrastructure that gives people stability in parts of the world that don't necessarily have as strong institutions as we have in North America, for example? What would be the opportunity there?
Well, I think the opportunity right now comes in Bitcoin usability. The last 10 years have been about accumulating Bitcoin, and those that have been responsible and believe in the Bitcoin philosophy for some time have been accumulating Bitcoin. Now I think there should and there will be an emphasis on Bitcoin usability. But I think I would say Canada is lumped right into that. I don't think we have strong institutional, like today you cannot hold and use your money. Your money either sits somewhere where it's usable outside of your custody, or you can hold it in form of cash or Bitcoin or other forms. But that's largely unusable. You can't even use cash to pay your taxes at this point. So how useful is the cash that we hold? And when you think about the dichotomy between accessibility to money and the fact that yes, a large population of Canada, like 97%, is banked. Is that actually the best thing for accessibility to money? I would argue it's not, because like I think I have one of the craziest banking stories of anyone in this room, and I'm for sure the anomaly. But I also think that my story will not be unique in the coming years. And I think it is important that Bitcoin becomes usable so you can hold and use your money at the same time.
I agree with Adam on that. Canada's adopting pretty quick too. From it was 5% a year ago, I believe, of people in Canada that were holding Bitcoin. Now they're saying it's over 13%. There's something around the realm of 2 billion people in the world that do not have access to banking. The infrastructure just isn't there. There's too much corruption in the government. There's a lot of issues surrounding that. So when you see companies like ADA, Charles Hoskinson, and that's spoken about this before, where he's trying to provide that service to people in Africa and places that don't have it. This is a unique situation where we're able to build up an infrastructure essentially extremely quickly, extremely inexpensively, and it's extremely efficient. I mean, it's a win-win-win, and it's incorruptible for the most part. When you look at all the use cases for it and how quickly it can be implemented, I don't see how it could be stopped. It's just going to be which one is the best one to get involved with and how to exercise it. Access to money is important, like Adam was saying. Some of it right now, you either have it locked up and you can't use it, and you're earning a very small amount of interest, probably less than what the inflation rate is currently in most cases, unless you're Nancy Pelosi or someone that is an amazing investor. It's that's right. There's going to be a massive change in the monetary systems around the world from it. You just look at the SWIFT system and how archaic it seems and compared to what Bitcoin can do for you so quickly. And the learning curve is not that difficult for just utilization and stuff. You don't have to necessarily be building new protocols and things to get involved in it. And a lot more people are seeing that. I think that's where we're seeing the adoption increase so quickly, even in Canada.
So Bitcoin, obviously, store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. In Western countries and here in Canada and America, we're seeing the primary use of Bitcoin as it is as a store of value. In places like in Africa and South America, we're seeing out of people looking for solutions to the problems that they deal with, trying to transact with each other, finding Bitcoin and using it as a medium of exchange. I think this is where all the innovation is going to be around. It is that sort, like, we don't have that as much in Canada because our legacy financial system is very good at servicing whatever we need to interact with the market, however we need to interact with the market. Whereas obviously in these other places, like you're saying, the unbanked, Bitcoin is the obvious solution where all you need is a cell phone to have an indisputable settlement. I think in places like El Salvador, which I like to call El Larpador, where the government is sort of pushing out Bitcoin onto the people, I don't think we're going to see a lot of rise in use. Just even if more governments start to take it on, it's going to be specifically rising from people who are solving problems where they need to transact with each other, and they need a solution to do that. So the state pushing Bitcoin in any way is not going to be very productive. The use of Bitcoin will arise out of people's need to eat and transact within the market.
I'm going to add more examples to that. I think that yes, we're looking at Bitcoin, the network. There's Bitcoin as a means of exchange. There's Bitcoin as an asset, and depending on political policies and laws and those kind of things, it will be used for different means. But tangible examples that we're seeing global, I think there's going to be a continued expansion from a central bank perspective. A lot of countries that don't have their own central banks, we're gifted that we have that, and it's a gift until it's not. The fact that we could print our own money, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying that we have control, but some countries do not, and they're pegged to the US dollar or others, and they can't control their destiny. So Bitcoin is going to help them do more and more. Countries that are resource rich, and instead of just being exploited for their resources and then having various people blow that money at the political level, could potentially reinvest that in Bitcoin and Bitcoin infrastructure to really bring wealth to their country. Those are, and the banking one is another one. But fast forward to first world countries as well. I mean, we just saw a law passed where retailers are going to be allowed to pass credit card fees to consumers, or an extra 3% charge that will be have to be displayed, but will be allowed to be done. That's just a law that's just asking to be disrupted at some point, right? Bitcoin, the network, what we saw with the guys over at Strike, being able to do instant Bitcoin to cash or cash to Bitcoin and payment transactions, and integrating into current infrastructure will change payment mechanisms. I also like to talk about Bitcoin as an asset. Like we talk about banking. Banking is not just being able to own some of your asset and then pay for something. It's also being able to have access to credit. And we could debate if that's good or not, but we are seeing Bitcoin being used as a collaterable asset, which I think is a good thing, which enables peer-to-peer lending, which enables collateralization, which enables giving people to hold their Bitcoin and be able to tap into excess capital to invest in businesses, to invest in real estate. So I see a huge market, and we're seeing that happen. And Bitcoin just does what it does best. If liquidations happen, it resets, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. We're going to see a lot of innovation in all those three things: the network, the way, the medium of exchange, and Bitcoin as a collateralizable asset. And all those things will be dictated based on government policy and taxation.
Traditional finance, so traditional banks. I mean, we're seeing as Bitcoin becomes more and more mainstream, getting more and more adoption of Bitcoin just in the general population. You're seeing large financial institutions doing a crash course on what is a digital asset? How do we integrate this? Should we integrate this into our systems? So how do you see that unfolding over the next 12 months? Like, what are the opportunities for collaboration with kind of conventional financial institutions that still have a big role to play in Canadian marketplace, for example? Like, what would be the opportunities for collaboration if you were advising? This is going to be kind of a hot button question. If you're advising a major financial institution, what would be your advice to them on what they should be doing with Bitcoin?
Well, for the most part, the challenges in the Bitcoin ecosystem arise primarily from the legacy financial system, as Adam, you have experience with, and many Bitcoiners have experience with. Currently, banks and other legacy institutions are in the way more than anything. They make it very difficult for Bitcoin businesses to operate. They make it very difficult for Bitcoin entrepreneurs to operate, and just people to exist with Bitcoin. I don't see much innovation coming from the legacy system. Everyone that I've kind of spoken to from that area has they are trying to make Bitcoin fit in boxes when it's a completely different thing. And then meanwhile, on the ground, real innovation is coming from Bitcoiners like Rodolfo at CoinKite, Steve Barber at Upstream Data, obviously Francis with me at Bull Bitcoin. This is where all the development in the space is going to continue to come from. And legacy financial is just going to be in the way for a very, very, very long time.
Adam, you're probably best to answer some of these things on this question, but before I pass it over to you, a lot of the bank, if I was going to tell a financial institution right now what they should do about it, I think that a lot of them see it as a threat. A lot of them, but not all of them. There's a lot of great minds in the financial industry and in investing and things out there that are already getting on board. They see that this is inevitable. It is not something they're going to be able to just push away, to ignore. They have to find a way to work with it and a way to probably improve it as well. Regulatory mechanisms and things by the government will make a big difference in all of this. Once they have the framework in front of them to understand what they can do with it, I think you'll see a lot more banking institutions and financial institutions start investing in it and looking at how they can work with it as opposed to against it. Even for the past 6 months to a year, you see people like Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan, BlackRock, Larry Fink. These guys are all getting into it. They all see the potential for it. They want to be involved, and even if they don't, they know that they have to. But it is a threat to their overall earnings, and I mean, it's quicker, it's more efficient, there's less fraud. There's advantages and disadvantages to it, but I'm sure that the people behind these things will find a way to try and work with it. Right now, they don't. Getting a bank account with a company that has Bitcoin in the name, even if you're not trying to borrow anything, is very difficult. But I see that changing very quickly, and as you can see from how many people are here, this is not going away. So if they want to take advantage of it and work with it, I'd say get involved with it now. Start learning how to understand it, what to do with it, and how you're going to be able to profit from it in the future and help your customers, because this is where it's going.
Yeah, I think it needs a mindset shift from that institutional level. Right now, the banks do not, and traditional legacy finance does not make money by making your money more free or more useful. They make money, and their profit margins are by locking your money up and lending it out fractionally. And that is like a complete antithesis to the Bitcoin model, to the Bitcoin mantra, that's literally why Bitcoin was created. It took this problem of fractional currency and the fallacy of fiat and flipped it on its head and said, this is scarce, this is provably scarce. Every single transaction is in a database that is public. There are no secrets and no closed doors. And it's going to require a big shift. I had a conversation with someone at a large bank in 2014. We were talking about Bitcoin, and they were interested in understanding how they could get into the Bitcoin space. And they of course needed a crash course, like in-depth course on how Bitcoin worked and the blockchain and the proof of work mining algorithms. And his first question after like some quite serious conversations and instructions and how-to courses were, well, how do we control that? And I was like, oh, my guy, you missed the point. Like, you don't. That's the problem. You don't. And so that's almost 10 years ago now. So hopefully the institutions have caught up. Hopefully they have this more collaborative mindset. But it requires a complete shift of the profit model that traditional finance is currently employing.
So I'm going to go back. I've talked about this in other talks before, relating what we're seeing here with other industries. Like, so in my previous businesses, I innovated a lot in the open source world in the days where Microsoft and IBM were the enemies of open source, and now Microsoft and IBM basically but are the biggest players in open source and have driven their entire business model to shift to that model. It took a long time, right? We're still very early, and I say that because I believe that Bitcoin will be infrastructure for a lot of things moving forward. Just fast forward in terms of, from a banking perspective, they will shift when consumer demand shifts. And I also believe that traditional finance will play a role. We are part of that. I have stories that I've shared in other talks where, this is before I even joined 3IQ. 3IQ products enabled my parents to really, achieve retirement because they were able to invest their RRSP monies in a product that was regulated. And they didn't have the ability to understand Bitcoin and buy it on exchange and go into custody. Like, we served a purpose in the market for that reason. So going to banks, I think they can, if they want to, become a trusted gateway for, if we want to bring in 99% of the population into the space, it's got to require parties who have access to these people. We can't see them as enemies all the time. So I think consumer demand shift, when the generation that has no real estate and owns no stock wants to start a business and owns a lot of Bitcoin and goes to a bank and saying, I want to borrow money to start a business and I want to sell my Bitcoin, the banks will lend against that collateral. That will happen. It will just be a shift based on consumer demand. The next one, I see a huge opportunity for banks playing a trusted middle ground. Like, right now they have millions of people already onboarded. They could act as a trusted source or intermediary to be able to facilitate peer-to-peer transactions and get a cut of that if they wanted to. And I'm talking way out there in terms of ideas, but there's a room for them to play if they wanted to, while preserving the core values of Bitcoin.
I might disagree with that a little bit, respectfully, just because I think that we've seen people who give up. Like, I understand the use case for people looking for pure price exposure to Bitcoin, and I think your example is super true of that persona. But I think that the real innovation behind Bitcoin is that you can have control of your money, and if we continue and super on board with the idea of, like, they're not the enemy. I think that we all hopefully want a more financially sovereign society. But the way to be sovereign is to have control and usability of your money yourself. If you need your Bitcoin on Sunday afternoon and you need your bank's permission to do that, it's not happening. If you have to have it on Thanksgiving, it's not happening. If it's past 5 p.m., it's not happening. And I think that there are so many failures in that point, or, like, I mean, everyone knows what a banker's hour is for a reason, and Bitcoin runs outside of that.
I think they can act as a gateway. I'm not trying to be a banker
absolutely
friend,
a gateway. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely
So it's like
a gateway.
You get exposure to the space through an environment that you understand, and then you get to do more of the research, and then you go into that next leg. That's my belief. And again, if we fight the system and try to bring people in by trying to say, like, let me give you an hour crash course on self-custody, you're going to lose 90% of the population. So how do we enable existing infrastructure to provide as a gateway? It's almost like it's an orange pill through the banking system.
Yeah, I would say there's an opportunity still. Like, the post office didn't teach anyone how to email, but the post office had the monopoly on communications for a long time. And then email came around, and no one, how many people in this room, like, actually raise your hand, who knows what the SMTP protocol is? So, like, 10, 15%. How many people use email? Right, 100%. So, like, people interact with by the way, the SMTP protocol is the email protocol that you all use when you send an email. Everyone knows how to use email because companies have come in and they've made it possible to interact with the protocol very, very easily. I don't disagree that could be the bank, but I think back to my earlier comment, it requires that mindset shift of like
agreed.
Gmail didn't need anyone Gmail didn't need the post office to convince everyone that email was a better option than sending letters to the mail.
And I think whether it's and we're going on a tangent here, which is a good thing, but whether it's the banks that play in America or not, I think there needs to be a mind shift in general in the sense of how we bring people into the space. Yeah. If we go too extreme, it scares people off, and they just want to stay into their day to day. So we have to be kinder and more and explain in a simple way in terms of how it empowers them versus saying, if you don't do this, we're all going to die.
Being a non-custodial platform, I think there's this misconception that Bitcoin is so difficult for so many people to understand, and this is what has created all of these custody businesses. But it's really quite simple. We have all of this stuff shrouded around it, but at the end of the day, it's money, and people can understand that. And I have elderly people that I've onboarded with Bitcoin that operate with self-custody, and as well as younger people. I think it's kind of an unfair assumption that X amount of 90% of people would not be able to figure out self-custody. The most important component of Bitcoin is that you have the ability to hold it yourself, to control it yourself. Allowing someone else to control your funds in any way, whether it's fiat money or whether it's Bitcoin, is just a risk measurement that the user have to make a decision on how much risk they're willing to take on and how much trust exists. I think in traditional finance, legacy banking, the trust is broken, and we've seen countless examples of that trust being broken. And I think this is a pretty good pitch for anybody who can take the time to think for themselves to reach out and grasp the value of their time and take the efforts of their labor under control for themselves, or for their family or their community. The self-custody is extremely important, and yes, there will be people who need help, but I don't see legacy or traditional finance systems supporting that with good intentions.
I know you want to jump back in. I can just see the debate wanting to continue on, but we're going to jump on. This will be our last question for the panel. I'm not sure. Are we going to do Q&A with the crowd as well? Q&A with the crowd. Perfect. So last question here, and maybe I'll kind of do 2 parts to the question. What regulatory changes are you expecting over the next 12 months in Canada? So I know that there's lots of work and people are trying to make sure we have banking access, things like that, across the country. What are you expecting over the next 12 months that would make a material impact and improve the access to Bitcoin and services to people across the country? And then the other kind of twist I'll put onto it and get a perspective on as we talk about kind of the regulatory environment in Canada would be, what would happen if the Bank of Canada tomorrow said, we're going to create a digital currency for Canada? How does that change your plan? Would that change anything that you're doing with Bitcoin right now?
I can jump into that. If the Bank of Canada came out with a CBDC tomorrow, I would work longer hours to make Bitcoin more accessible for everyone. That would be the absolute death of freedom in Canada. And I would like that clipped, and I would like that displayed everywhere if and when that happens. That will be the death of freedom in Canada. So I would work harder. I already work fairly hard, but I would work harder to make sure that Bitcoin was accessible to Canadians. As far as regulation is concerned, I do hope more accessibility to like just normal corporate things are possible in the space. I mean, like Alex said, like I know personally a media company called the Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast. They are a podcast. They do nothing other than talk about Bitcoin and financial things, and they cannot get a bank account because talking about Bitcoin is very, very dangerous. That is bad. Like they're running a business. They need to be able to like pay rent and do these things. So I mean, like I think that there needs to be a little bit of pushback in terms of like what Kalea was talking about earlier, the insurance coalition that they're coming out with is amazing. I know as a publicly traded Bitcoin company, like we got to go to the Bahamas for our D&O insurance, and I pay more in D&O insurance than like it's astronomical how much I mean, you know the same thing, Pascal. It's like it is outrageous the limited services that we as Bitcoin companies have access to. So I do hope that goes well. That's obviously super self-serving. I think that hopefully another thing that we'll see is more clarity on like what is going to get a pass as being a security but not a security, and what won't be. Bitcoin has been deemed not a security, rightfully so. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how these 6,999 other crypto tokens that like are securities by the definition of the Howey test get claimed to be either not a security for some level of reasons, or if they are deemed securities, that will mix up the space quite substantially. So I think that's that's the red herring in the space right now. And as far as regulation goes, that's going to be, I think, the biggest the biggest action that could be taken in that sense.
I'm right there with Adam. I'm going to reiterate exactly what he said. The CBDC coming out, replacing cash, or is just the limitation on your freedom. In fact, it's the extinction of your freedom. I think it's a terrible idea. I think everybody that's into the crypto space is well aware of why they're into it, and that why would they settle for something that isn't as good coming out from the government that's going to restrict things from them. Regulation, I think, is an extremely important part of all this. There's a lot of money out there waiting to be invested, and a lot of it's being held back at the moment strictly because they don't know what the position of the government is. They don't know what's going to happen if they get involved in it, and all of a sudden a regulation comes in or a law or something that's going to cause them problems. I believe we've already just put some rules in place to be able only a company can hold 1% on their books of Bitcoin right now in Canada was something they brought forth in August. Regardless of whether they're good or bad, it's going to at least provide a clearer path to those people, the venture capitalists, the investors out there, the people that want to get more involved into the space. You look back in history from when electricity first came out. I mean, if the first person using electricity electrocuted themselves giving a presentation, said, well, that stuff's dangerous. I guess we're just going to have to not do that, or fire. Somebody got burned. Let's not use that stuff anymore. I mean, you want to be able to use the electricity, but you need to be able to make sure that it's safe. The people that are using it aren't going to end up dead from it. But it's essential to the way we live our lives these days. This is the same thing with crypto and our financial institutions. We need it. We want to use it, but we want to make sure it's safe and it's regulated to some extent. I think once that stuff comes into play, we're going to do a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that people always ask, is CBDC bad for Bitcoins, because they don't understand Bitcoin. So I mean, we'll put that aside in terms of and the freedom, all that stuff. I don't think it's the same at all. And the government does it. I think it's just going to push people even more towards finding solutions towards monetary independence. So I think it's a marketing tool for bringing people into the crypto and Bitcoin space, which is a good thing. But in terms of regulation, can't predict what's happening. But in terms of what exactly is going to happen, but all the problems that Adam identified are real and need to be solved. And there are other things as well. I'm going to talk a little bit in terms of three things that I'd like to see happen. One, there needs to be more talent on the regulatory front. There's a lot of poaching happening. From companies who are starting and are basically poaching from the regulators to try to have an edge with the regulators, where we're seeing a lot of switch over in talent, which is slowing the process down. I'm not saying the regulators don't want to talk. I've talked with them all the time, and they are asking good questions. They're trying to learn, but it's really hard when you have so much turnover. So there's this big mishmash of poaching, and I think we have to find a way to ideally have the experts stay in their seats long enough to be able to make decisions. That's not number one. Number two, the fact that we have segregated jurisdictions across Canada makes it very hard. Every province wants to have their own independence, which I agree with, but at the same time, it makes regulatory approval very difficult. So I'm looking forward to for more collaboration, hopefully. And then from a political perspective, I really do hope it does not become political. I know that both liberals and conservatives at the federal level, I'm in Ottawa, everyone under the radar knows and is looking to learn, and there's always an expert and champion in each party, but it's always about politics. It's always about who gets the votes, and they're going to say what they want or do what they think. And I really don't want it to become polarizing as politics has become. I hope Bitcoin stays under the radar and that we could go at the table with either party to demonstrate the benefits to Canada. And finally, I'd like for Canada to step up and stop waiting for Daddy Gensler to make a decision and just make their own decisions. We always wait after the U.S., and the U.S. is stalling our progress right now.
Yeah, definitely the U.S. is stalling our progress. The entire state operation is slowing down the economic potential that Bitcoin provides entrepreneurs and businesses and individual actors. Bitcoin is already regulated by FinTrack. It's not a security. Where we're going to see evolution is in custodial platforms and any of the casino coins or clams or whatever you call them. This is where there's going to be a massive push, like Adam was talking about, into calling fraud when there's fraud, and essentially making sure that the communication of these institutes it is honest and keeps the retail investors safe. So we'll see that continuing to evolve. I don't know how it's going to go. Like Adam said, it's kind of a big unknown. But certainly when some of these brilliant, wonderful things that are out there that are not Bitcoin and kind of the other space start to get into more and more trouble, and what they are up to starts to come more and more to light, I think we're going to see major crackdown, which unfortunately will also stifle Bitcoin.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our panel. I think we're going to turn now to the Q&A in the crowd. So we're going to help facilitate that. How best are we going to do that? Do you have people running with the mics? Okay. We throw them. We're throwing the mics. There we go.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you for the panel. I do have a question for Adam and mathematics, I guess, primarily. What could be done? So let's play out the scenario that Pascal said a little bit earlier. Let's say these trusted institutions come into play, banks and trusts, they act as gateways. We now onboard 90% of the population on. What can be done to make sure that the education doesn't stop there? And just because it's easy to use, you know, they stop and they don't keep going down the curve of learning about what legal title is, learning about what self-custody is, potentially taking some assets out. You already kind of see it happening with the crypto trading platforms that got regulated as restricted dealers, where Canadian retail investors seem to not care that much to learn the distinction between buying the actual Bitcoin and buying a contract to buy, sell, and hold the Bitcoin through one of those platforms, right? That's a thing that I'm personally struggling with, trying to explain to people that you shouldn't be keeping the assets on those exchanges because you don't have legal title on. And if one of those defaults, then you're sitting at the end of some contract that they might not be able to make good on, right? So what could be done concretely, as much as you can tell?
Okay, well, I mean, the obvious path to figuring out why custody is a bad idea is to lose everything you have. We've seen examples of that. Many various exchanges from around the world that popped up in 2016 that stole people's money. We saw what happened with Quadriga. There's example over example of what happens, even probably with people's personal experience with having someone in their family or a friend hold their Bitcoins for them. It's a horror waiting to unfold. It's not really a matter of if, it's when. Especially heading into the really rough financial times that we're going for. But the first step to basically understanding why the custody is important is to just have somebody acquire real Bitcoin and explain to them the difference between like why control of your own keys means you're controlling your money. The way I explain it, like very quickly, is if you're working, anytime you're engaging with an exchange or custodian. We're in Calgary here. It's very cold, so you know if you go to the bar, you want to check your coat. You put your coat, you check your coat, and you get a ticket. And then at the end of the night, when you go to leave into the freezing cold, you better hope that your coat is there, because all the forces in the universe will not turn that ticket that you bear into the winter coat you need. And that's essentially the I think that's pretty easy for people to understand. Do you want to have the thing, or do you want to have someone's promise to give you the thing?
I think as far as like ironically, if as Pascal said, if the custodians can be used as this Trojan horse to get people into a further realm into sovereignty, KPIs have to be how many people do you onboard, and then what percentage is offboarded. It's like a graduation thing, right? Post-secondary schools presumably are stoked when their students graduate and go on to find good jobs. Should to a custodian be stoked when their services are no longer needed because the individual has gone on to become fully sovereign? I think it's that mindset shift behind if what we're saying is the custodian plays an important role as far as onboarding and eliminating the barriers. I think that's the important mindset that should be in there.
I think from a strategic perspective, it's about coming together and thinking about growing the pie together. We're committed to, I don't have a marketing budget. I have a research and education budget. You're not going to see me sponsor Air Canada Center or a stadium or Matt Damon or Kardashians anytime soon. You're going to see me invest in platforms and people who are building amazing educational materials, and we're going to support those people, and we're going to make sure that those are accessible to the people who have the trust of Canadians and clients. That could be some of their financial advisors. It could be the banks. It could be friends and family. We have to reach people where they are. But I think the big thing that's happening now, whether it's with the regulators or whether it is with education, is every company is doing their own thing. And I think it requires an organization like what Kile has built and others to come together and say, well, let's pool our resources. Let's work together. Let's not duplicate. And that's something I'm not seeing yet, but we're happy to take the lead and continue to do that and collaborate with anyone who wants to collaborate in the education and research space.
We have time for one last quick question. So one last question.
So speaking more on the physical asset of Bitcoin innovation recently, we're seeing more traditional, quote unquote, traditional tech companies coming into the space, like Intel with their mining chip. Do you guys have a specific opinion about these more traditional companies coming into Bitcoin mining and holding more assets? Because it could just be not about what Bitcoin actually is, but more so for their profits and kind of opinion gain.
My opinion is it's great. The more companies that can get involved with it, the better. Some of it's going to be good innovation, some of it's going to be bad. There's upsides and downsides, and they're all exploring it right now. Even ourselves, one of my businesses, BitcoinMarketplace.com, we're accepting Bitcoin for purchases of computer equipment and stuff, and I see a lot of miners utilizing it for purchasing mining equipment and extra stuff. And from our standpoint, it was great because looking at it, you don't have to worry about chargebacks, you don't have to worry about fraud, you don't have to worry about a lot of things. For the customer side of things, it's great because there's anonymity there. Intel and anyone else who wants to get involved in the area, it just means more people are going to learn about it, more people are going to get excited about it, it's going to give more people access to it, and this is how these things grow. So I think it's positive.
I'm pro-business in general. I mean, if Intel is bad, then we're all bad. We're all in business. And if we're thinking that Bitmain is not in it to make money, there could be, business is about driving value and driving value for society in return for profit. That's the exchange that we're trying to do. And then in return, you take those profits ideally and reinvest them back into the community to grow the pie. So I think it's a good thing. And again, the same thing we could see. I'm a fan of Jack Dorsey. I mean, he's gone really heavy into Bitcoin. Some could say he's legit or not, but I mean, sometimes having the might of larger companies, the resources that they have. And again, I'm going to go back. I saw it in open source. Once IBM and Microsoft committed to the space, it really took off. And today, open source powers everything. Just like when Adam was talking about SMTP, no one understands what it is, but it powers email. Open source powers pretty much everything we run that's electronic right now. So again, I don't see it as a bad thing personally.
And just to jump in here as well, we're seeing this even at Deloitte, big international consulting firm. I mean, they're seeing it where their clients are more interested. It's becoming more and more mainstream, more of a topic of the day, where conventional businesses want to be briefed. They want to know, how does this impact the future of consumers? How does this impact their businesses long term? So you also look at it from our kids' perspectives. Like, my daughters now track the currency exchange on Roblox. So how much does their Roblox get them at the end of the day? So they're tracking different forms of currency right now from a very young age. So this is going to continue to become more and more of that mainstream thought process. So with that, can we get a big round of applause for our panel?